Romanian gang leader Florian Tudor and his trusted associate Sorinel Constantin Marcu feared their organization would be dismantled after journalist Brian Krebs wrote a 3-part investigative series detailing their criminal operations on his blog. According to the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, the OCCRP, Tudor's organization controlled at least 10% of a $2 billion annual global market for skimmed cards. After running the scam reliably for years, Krebs' article threatened to cost Tudor millions. Florian Tudor, like most gang leaders, is a man who's unafraid of violence, didn't take kindly to being exposed. Tudor wanted revenge, and Marcu was the man who could make it happen. Shortly after the publication, an ominous message from an address tied to a Romanian hacker appeared in Krebs' inbox. It said, quote, "Don't worry, we are coming for you. You and your wife, all is matter of time, amigo." The Riviera Maya gang, led by Florian Tudor, originated in Craiova, Romania, thousands of miles from the tourist hotspot of the Riviera Maya in Mexico. Around 1,000 members were a part of the sophisticated operation. They captured bank card data by installing skimmers on ATMs and hacking into well-known manufacturers' machines to install their custom-designed software. Tudor was a businessman and would spend his profits on luxury apartments in his Romanian hometown, using the money from the gang's profits. Gang members referred to him as El Tiburon, or the Shark. The gang's leader had a murky past, and there are conflicting reports about his life before the Riviera Maya gang. Tudor was born in Craiova, Romania, and became involved in crime at a young age, although he had a clean criminal record. The details of any of his earlier crimes are unknown. When Tudor was in Italy, authorities took him into custody and ultimately deported him, although, again, the details of those charges were unclear. While details about Tudor may be cloudy, one thing is clear. Tudor knew how to run advanced and carefully planned scams. The gang made money from ATM skimming, which involves stealing credit card information by putting a skimming device on an ATM. The device reads inserted credit and debit cards as magnetic stripes, which enables criminals to put the card information on cloned credit and debit cards. Once they've created the cloned cards, they could make purchases and withdraw money while the original card owner was blissfully unaware. What's the easiest way for consumers to discover that their information has been stolen? To make big purchases or withdrawals immediately, thus causing the bank to call the victim and inquire about the charges. Tudor knew that to get away with a heist of this size, he'd have to move slowly and smartly. Not only did the Riviera Maya gang wait months before they withdrew any money from the compromised cards, they also stole small amounts of money. They withdrew $200 from each card, making it far less noticeable to their victims. The operation had many ways to hide the root location of their crimes. When they finally used the stolen card information, they would have members in different countries go to ATMs far from the Riviera Maya region of Mexico and nowhere near where the victims lived. The gang employed skimmers and pullers who operated in places like India, Barbados, Grenada, Paraguay, Indonesia, Brazil, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, making it even harder for victims to pinpoint the location of the theft. To seem more legitimate, Tudor and his stepbrother, Adrian Anaescu, set up Top Life Servicios, a Cancun-based company where they could hide their criminal activities. They quickly realized they would run more effectively if they operated their own ATMs. The group purchased machines from well-known manufacturers such as Hyosung and Triton, hacked their processors, and installed custom-designed software to steal people's information without any extra hardware. Now, all the gang needed was placement and credibility. According to the OCCRP, Maltiva, a well-respected Mexican bank, began its business relationship with Top Life Servicios in 2014, an agreement that benefited both parties. Maltiva wanted to branch out into the Riviera Maya area of the Yucatan Peninsula's Caribbean coast. Top Life Servicios wanted to appear as legitimate as possible, and sponsorship from a bank with name recognition printed on the side of their ATMs was exactly what was needed. Despite some red flags, Maltiva continued working with the company. Since Since local governments weren't enforcing any of the regulations, there was no reason to worry about any silly things like licenses or paperwork. The agreement with Maltiva covered the entire Riviera Maya area, where millions of tourists flock annually to Playa del Carmen, Tulum, and Cancun. Top Life installed their ATMs in hotels, restaurants, boardwalks, and beaches throughout the region and installed the machines without permission from any local governments. By 2017, Top Life operated over 100 Maltiva-branded ATMs, which copied roughly 1,000 cards every month. While the gang only withdrew small amounts of $200 from each card, their monthly income was $20 million. With so much money coming in, the gang had to account for it without raising suspicion. The OCCRP reported that from early 2014 until spring 2019, the criminal network was making $240 million annually and an estimated overall total of around $1.2 billion. In fact, the Riviera Maya gang controlled at least 10% of the $2 billion annual global market for skimmed cards. They concealed their profits through money laundering, using front companies, and purchasing luxury real estate. The shell companies had little or no actual business operations and were a vehicle for the gang to move money across the world. A network of cash mules helped physically transport large sums of money across borders. They traveled in small groups and used different modes of transportation to avoid detection at border crossings while carrying up to $200,000 in cash. Once the money reached its destination, members would deposit it into multiple bank accounts or use it to purchase high-value assets. Gang members also sent associates in countries like the United States cash via Western Union. The recipients would buy luxury goods like high-end cars and Rolex watches that they would resell for clean money. Tudor's Romanian wife, Rebecca Tudor, was the sole shareholder of a construction company called Redizat, which they used to launder the proceeds from the scheme. Her job was to receive the large sums of cash deposits that mules were carrying and put them into the company, where she would use the money to pay for construction projects, equipment, and materials. Rebecca was using the construction company for a range of projects, such as transforming an ex-government building in Craiova into a luxury apartment complex. Tudor purchased the building with a shell company and transferred ownership to Rebecca. Rebecca used the cash she received from Tudor's associates to pay for the $2.2 million renovation work to the property. She paid workers and suppliers in cash, avoiding a paper trail. They sold the high-end apartments for $110,000 each when the work was over. The gang transferred the proceeds to offshore companies that Tudor controlled. In their efforts to be untraceable, the criminal group buried some of the stolen money, placing it in plastic bags and burying it in places like empty lots, backyards, and even cemeteries. Dealing with money in the States, however, was a different story. Banks often freeze accounts when a card is used overseas without any notification. To stop this from slowing the gang down, they needed to withdraw the money from ATMs located in the United States. Tudor enlisted the help of Filip Serdaru, a Romanian who immigrated to Canada in 1999 after being persecuted in his home country. He was an expert in helping fellow Romanians across the U.S. border, having smuggled at least 295 people from Mexico into the U.S. in 2012 and 2013 alone. Serdaru would fly people into Cancun, the location of the Riviera Maya gang's headquarters, with at least one corrupt immigration agent. They were put on buses to travel to border cities like Tijuana, Mexicali, Ciudad Miguel Alman, where they would stay in hotel rooms rented by the gang. Mexican guides would bring Serdaru's people across the border on foot. Serdaru and his associates made roughly $2,200 for each person they brought across the border. A group of Eastern European men offered an ATM technician $6,000 to install Bluetooth skimming devices in the ATMs. The technician contacted Brian Krebs, a former Washington Post journalist specializing in internet security crimes. The gang planted Bluetooth skimming devices in many of their ATMs, making it even harder to detect them. When Krebs traveled to Mexico, he discovered that many ATMs had a Bluetooth link called Free to Move. The crime syndicate bribed and coerced ATM technicians to install the Bluetooth skimmers and paid technicians to compromise machines at competing ATM providers. The scheme essentially gained them control over Instacash, another Mexican-based ATM company. Krebs wrote a 3-part story on his blog, Krebs on Security, about ATM skimming and mentioned that an Eastern European gang was running the scam. The Instacash tech shared pictures of Instacash's chief deputies and screenshots of card data allegedly gained by the company's various skimming operations. The source was extremely scared for their safety, but stated that Tudor's gang was paying off Mexican authorities. Mexican police never followed up on Krebs' reporting, but the gang temporarily shut down their operations. A furious Tudor ordered members to temporarily temporarily extract chips from 10 of the ATMs they ran and 25 to 30 ATMs owned by other companies or banks. Tudor and his associates couldn't hide forever, and it was from within the gang's highest rankings that things began to implode. Constantin Sorinel Marcu was one of Tudor's most trusted men and his former bodyguard, but their friendship was clouded by resentment. Tudor was jealous of Marcu's relationships with women, and Marcu felt he wasn't getting a high enough cut from the business. As tensions were rising, Marcu began sabotaging Intercash's operations by applying superglue to Intercash ATM's pin pads and card acceptance slots. At the same time, Tudor was paranoid that Marcu would go to the police and reveal the gang's entire operation. In June 2018, Marcu was driving in Cancun. One moment he was following a member of Tudor's crew, and the next he had lost his life because of a bullet. Details of Marcu's demise are unclear, though he was likely dispatched somewhere else and moved to his car. Marcu's car was parked in front of a new apartment complex built and paid for by Tudor. The news media narrative of what happened avoided placing any blame on Tudor or his gang. However, Marcu's brother, Aurelio Marcu, spoke out against the Mexican authorities. He claimed that Tudor was giving the police large sums of hush money. Mexican authorities helped spin the news media narrative over the crime to avoid generating too much attention. By that point, Tudor was working so closely with police in the area that he was practically in charge. But Tudor's connections couldn't save him when law enforcement finally became suspicious of his operation. If you're enjoying this story, be sure to stay right on this video to find out all about Lamar Whitehead and how he's ripped off people around him. Romanian authorities issued a court order for Tudor's arrest on charges of attempted murder and leading a criminal network involved in human trafficking. Tudor was unwilling to go down without a fight, and a physical confrontation broke out when Mexican authorities arrested him. Video footage of Tudor wrestling officials and screaming while they carried him out by his arms and his legs went viral. Police arrested some of Tudor's associates who allegedly tried to assault at least one police officer during the exchange. Maltiva claimed to have been entirely unaware of any scam carried out on their branded machines, despite Krebs on Security exposing the gang in September of 2015. Krebs detailed how the ATM industry and law enforcement were being bribed and coerced by Tudor's associates while Maltiva did nothing. The bank stated they hadn't dealt with unusual complaints and denied any knowledge of Intercash. Maltiva also said that they audited their machines, but that statement was likely untrue. Despite allegations of fraud and corruption involving Maltiva's branded machines, they continued working with Top Life for a considerable time. They even signed a new agreement with Maltiva in 2019 to provide ATMs for the bank's customers. Maltiva didn't end its relationship with Top Life until Tudor's arrest and extradition to Romania. They made a statement emphasizing that the bank wasn't involved in any illegal activity and that Maltiva was also a victim of the ATM fraud. The operation went much further than just the bank's involvement. Jorge de la Peña Ruiz de Chavez, the leader of Mexico's Green Party, was removed from office after being accused of receiving money from the Romanian ATM skimming gang. The Mexican Ministry of Finance seized 79 bank accounts as part of their ongoing investigation into the criminal network, and one of those accounts belonged to de la Peña. He cooperated with authorities but denied any involvement in the group. De la Peña wasn't the only person to have their bank account frozen by the Mexican Ministry of Finance. Public figures like the former Secretary of Public Security of Cancun, Jose Luis Jonathan Young, his father Jose Luis Young Cruz, former governors of Quintana Roo, the owner of the Cuequi newspaper, Jose Alberto Gomez Alvarez, and the notary Nain Diaz Medina also lost access to their accounts during the investigation. In May 2020, the Mexican daily newspaper Reforma reported that Tudor and his associates enjoyed legal probation from a top anti-corruption official in the Mexican Attorney General's office. Florian Tudor is currently in a Mexican prison, fighting his extradition to Romania to face more charges. We've all heard about horror stories from vacationers visiting foreign countries. Tourists always seem like easy marks since they typically have large amounts of disposable cash ripe for the taking. The scary thing about the Maya Riviera gang was that legitimacy with which they operated. Their ATMs had a trusted brand, there was no evidence of tampering, and the sums being removed were relatively small so they would escape notice. The lessons here are to use the chip readers whenever possible, since the skimmers copy the magnetic strip. Some also suggest setting up a separate travel account to limit the damage should your card become compromised. Even while Tudor is in custody, his businesses are as strong as ever, which begs the question, why continue risking jail time? Florian Tudor is reminiscent of Dr. Evil, not understanding that he's making plenty of money through legitimate means. At the end of the day, a shark is always going to be a shark. At first glance, Lamar Miller Whitehead gave off the vibe of a successful New Yorker. In 2005, he purchased a home in Teaneck that cost nearly $500,000. He was always decked out in the latest fashions and was often spotted in a luxurious mink coat. While driving around in his Land Rover SUV, he displayed all the trappings of wealth. In reality, authorities determined that his money didn't come from his music industry connections, as he claimed, but through a joint criminal enterprise that included stealing the identities of multiple victims and making extravagant purchases with the ill-gotten cash and credit. Investigators had been trailing him since a suspected accomplice was arrested in 2004, and police finally caught up with him in 2006. By that time, prosecutors said Whitehead had stolen at least $2 million through the scam, and he faced several charges related to identity theft. While searching his Teaneck home, police recovered a stolen firearm, a cherry on top of the fraud charges. Whitehead used the stolen identities to open lines of credit in his victims' names. But authorities wouldn't understand the true scope of the scam until they concluded the investigation. Whitehead was convicted and sent to prison, though he emerged years later with a new persona and claimed to be a man of God. In addition to launching a church of sorts, he threw his hat in the ring as a candidate for Brooklyn Borough President. Along the way, he made some powerful friends and allies, including New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Meanwhile, he maintained that he was innocent of all the charges that led to his incarceration. As a political candidate, Whitehead emphasized his commitment to restoring the right to vote for individuals with a felony conviction on their criminal records. In 2021, he praised then-Governor Andrew Cuomo for signing a bill that would do precisely that. He also used the opportunity to proclaim his belief that he was wrongfully convicted years earlier. His victims and critics were skeptical that Whitehead had authentically turned his life around. Still, many others were drawn in by his promises and flowery language when he launched Leaders of Tomorrow International Churches with campuses across the Big Apple. The organization's website portrays him as a radical, revolutionary, innovative, anointed, and cutting edge, and describes some of the challenges he has faced throughout his life. As an infant, the site explains, Whitehead was left without a father when local politician Arthur Miller was killed by a group of police officers. That experience reportedly contributed to Whitehead's commitment to activism and political involvement. As for his stint in prison, the church website insists that Whitehead was illegally convicted and sentenced to 11 1/3 to 34 years in prison, which was one of the most challenging periods in his life. After serving 6 years behind bars, he was released and, according to the site, used the experience to launch a program designed to keep troubled youth from venturing down the wrong path. In 2014, Whitehead became an ordained pastor. 2 years later, he was named a bishop and used that title when running for borough president and in other public settings. His church's honorable intentions didn't do much to reform his image among those who still saw him as an ex-con. Former New York police officer Eric Adams was elected mayor in 2021 and quickly began implementing changes that he believed would make New York a safer and more prosperous city. Before running for this office, Adams had served as Brooklyn Borough President and a state senator, making a few local connections along the way. According to Whitehead, the two men became close, and in a series of social media posts ahead of the election, he urged his followers to cast a ballot for Adams. He frequently referred to the mayor as a mentor and friend and celebrated Adams' win in the Democratic primary race. At the time, Whitehead wrote that Adams had taught him a lot. He believed Adams was the best man for the mayor's job. Several photos of the two men posing together have been posted prominently on Whitehead's social media profiles. In 2016, Adams corroborated Whitehead's claims in a statement that signaled a close connection between the two men. Specifically, Adams cited similarities in their respective backgrounds and said that Whitehead deserves the same support and guidance he received as a young man. Adams was arrested at 15 years old, and because people embraced him when he was arrested, he wanted to help Whitehead. Whitehead has become a somewhat prominent figure in New York, but it's not just because of his criminal past and close ties to the mayor. In May 2022, the city was rocked by news of a fatal subway shooting aboard the Q train in Manhattan. Andrew Abdullah was later arrested and charged with counts including the death of passenger Daniel Enriquez. The suspect turned himself into authorities at a location near the offices of the Manhattan Legal Aid Society. Despite the violent nature of the crime, Abdullah was taken into custody without any resistance or complication. On cue, Whitehead was prepared to take credit for the peaceful surrender. As As for whether or not he played a pivotal role in the process, seems to depend on who you ask. As Whitehead asserted at the time, he planned to use his connections to the suspect and Adams as a way to facilitate a peaceful surrender. According to the plan, Whitehead and Abdullah were supposed to walk into a local police precinct together. There, the mayor would ensure the suspect was booked into custody. In the end, however, the drop-off point was changed and Abdullah's family went with him to turn himself in instead of Whitehead. The ex-con turned pastor explained that Abdullah had been a member of his church and said that concerned relatives reached out to him following the unprovoked subway shooting. According to Whitehead, Abdullah's aunt and mother reached out to him asking for his advice. He went on to note that he became close with Abdullah's family after the death of a young relative and wanted to do whatever he could to help everyone involved following the incident on the Q train. According to his public statement, his first piece of advice to Abdullah's aunt was to encourage the suspect to surrender. He stressed the importance of securing legal representation for the accused and establishing an agreement with detectives to allow him to turn himself in. From there, Whitehead said he phoned his buddy, the mayor, to advise him of the latest developments. Adams allegedly agreed with the terms of the surrender and offered to help facilitate a smooth encounter between police and Abdullah. Whitehead promised Abdullah and Mayor Adams would meet the family at the 5th precinct. However, a short time later, the bishop received several phone calls from law enforcement officials and detectives who had heard about the plan. Eventually, Abdullah's family decided to take him to an attorney's office instead of the precinct. Despite the change of plans, Whitehead said he continued to support the family and did what he could to ensure a peaceful surrender. He waited with the aunt and the grandmother, and when he went to greet his mother, Abdullah got out of the car and the marshals took him in. Whitehead described the arrest as a bum rush. The Legal Aid Society seemed to back up Whitehead's story of the police officer's response. They said that before Andrew Abdullah could voluntarily surrender himself to the local precinct, he was needlessly ambushed out front of the Manhattan trial office by city marshals and denied of his opportunity to first consult with counsel. Although the incident didn't play out as Whitehead envisioned, he said Adams praised his efforts and declared that the intervention protected our city. Abdullah's defense attorney, on the other hand, offered a different account of events. Kristen Bruin asserted that Whitehead had no affiliation with the family or legal team, calling his claims of involvement in the process untrue. The mayor's office didn't do much to clarify things. It offered only a vague statement via spokesperson Fabian Levy, who said there's a violent man off the street. New Yorkers should thank the NYPD for apprehending this dangerous individual. In the end, it's unclear whether Whitehead was involved in orchestrating the surrender. We can't say how much he really helped the situation if he was. Some people might choose to believe the words of a pastor. Still, given his complicated past and the contradictory account of Abdullah's attorney, it's clear that Whitehead isn't as credible as he wants his fellow New Yorkers to believe. Like other controversial pastors, Whitehead attracted public criticism after Abdullah's surrender when he showed up in a Rolls-Royce and was spotted wearing a high-end luxury jacket. Although he dismissed the backlash by insisting he was reacting to an emergency situation and had been engaged in personal business that required his dressy look. Nevertheless, it was just the latest example of bad optics in light of a six-figure judgment against him that was handed down more than a decade earlier while he was still behind bars. In 2009, a court determined that Whitehead owed $261,000 to a symphony conductor named Maximo Bragado Darman to repay an outstanding loan. Brian Etta, who had been a volunteer for Adams' 2007 campaign to become borough president, also sued Whitehead for allegedly stealing nearly $20,000 during the sale of a home. Although Etta eventually dropped the suit because Whitehead was already in prison by that time, he expressed concern over the swindler's apparent connection to Adams. He didn't think Adams would keep a guy like Whitehead in his inner circle. It just didn't make sense. The recent display of wealth wasn't the first time the bishop turned heads with his lavish spending after his release from prison. News outlets reported in 2016 that Whitehead could be seen driving around the city in a pair of luxury vehicles, a Maserati and a Bentley, even as he still owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to the conductor. His involvement in Leaders of Tomorrow international churches has also led to criticism, and his feeble attempts to explain himself have only created more questions. When one reporter asked about the questionable attempt to register as a non-profit organization, Whitehead dismissed the entire line of questioning and shot back, asking why the reporter wanted to know that. He initially portrayed the organization as a non-profit aimed at helping young people. Then, prosecutors sent him a stern letter instructing him to stop misrepresenting specific facts about the organization and its supporters. So, Whitehead restructured the entire plan, and Leaders of Tomorrow international churches began operating as a for-profit entity because its website prominently features a donation button, there seems to be no doubt that the bishop is still trying to make as much money as possible from this supposedly holy venture. With his questionable past and outstanding debt against him, it's no wonder that Whitehead isn't eager to entertain any suspicion that he's still scamming victims to support his life of luxury. After repeatedly calling Adams a mentor, it might make sense that he's following in the mayor's footsteps by launching his own bid to become Brooklyn Borough President. In addition to supporting causes that would help rehabilitate formerly incarcerated New Yorkers, his campaign emphasized programs to provide equal access to education. He wants to use the position to bring needed resources to underserved communities, believing zip codes shouldn't determine one's education and future. Although he received some support based on his connections and ability to campaign effectively in various neighborhoods throughout Brooklyn, his controversial past likely doomed his effort from the start. Whitehead lost the race, and former city councilman Antonio Reynoso took over as borough president. Despite his best efforts to portray himself as an activist and man of God, it seems that he simply can't shake his image as a con man and crook. And even though he claims to be a bishop, Whitehead isn't immune to the crime wave that's happening in 2022. He claimed that he and his wife were robbed of more than $1 million in jewelry while he was preaching at church on Sunday, July 24th, 2022. He was actually live streaming from inside his church when it happened, and videos show at least one person pointing a gun at Whitehead and interrupting his sermon. Whitehead claims that they took off his bishop's ring, his wedding band, and his bishop chain. And he also had chains underneath his robe. According to Whitehead, the thief started tapping his neck to check if he had on anything else. To Whitehead, that meant they knew who he was and they had been watching him. And Whitehead definitely wants justice. One big step to not getting robbed is to stop flexing on Instagram. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section, on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerning is using an ATM to you in regards to having your information stolen?